Hi everyone, today I want to talk to you about inking and printing a Pronto Plate, a lithographic Pronto Plate. So what I have here is a Pronto Plate with a drawing that I've made on it using a lithographic greasy pencil. And what else you want to have prepared is to have a glass surface that you're working on, some lithographic black ink or some sort of an oil-based ink. Let's see, some gum arabic and a measuring tool if you have one handy. A shot glass is usually what I use. And then you'll also need two bowls, one with clean water and one that's empty, and have a sponge handy as well. Nice big sponge is easiest to hold for this process. So let's see, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and secure the plate to the inking table, and the way we do that is just to splash a bit of water onto this glass table, and it creates like a suction that holds the plate in place as we ink it. So that's pretty secure. I'm going to add just a little bit more here, a little bit more down here. So now that that's being held in place, I'm going to come over here to the ink that I've already pulled out. I pulled out just a little bit. I'm going to warm it up a bit with my palette knife. And I'm going to pick up a strip of it. I'm going to use this brayer, so what I want to do is create a reservoir ink about the same width as the width of that brayer. And I'll go ahead and spread out the ink on the inking table. Now remember, what you want to see is a soft velvety surface with little sparkles of light coming off of the tips of those inks. You don't want it to look really wet and sticky, and you want to hear just a slight sizzle, not too much of a stickiness, but a sizzle in the ink. Alright, I think we're ready to apply the ink to the plate. Now I do want to point out that in most cases what you would want to do is get a brayer that's actually the width of your image, so you only have to go over it in one pass to cover the entire image. But I think in our studio most of our brayers are going to be a little bit smaller, so I'm going to do this demonstration with the typical size that we have in the studio. But if you can find one that's a little bit wider that covers your entire image, I would go with that wider brayer. So you're going to pick up a little bit of ink. Now, before you apply it to the plate, remember that the whole premise of lithography is water repelling ink. So what we want to do is, instead of just starting to ink it up, which would cover this entire plate with water, we want to wet the surface that we don't want attracting the ink and leave these greasy areas open to where it will attract ink. Now this is where the gum arabic comes into play. I'm going to just use this shot glass. I usually like to pour about a shot glass full into the bowl of water. If you don't have a measuring tool nearby like a shot glass, a few squirts will usually work as well. It's really not a very careful measurement, because basically what this gum arabic does, it dissolves into the water and it helps act as kind of a resist. So it's just an aid to the water to help resist the oiliness and the grease of the ink. If you don't have gum arabic, it should still work fine. You might have a little bit of trouble with scumming, but you can go ahead and try printing without it. So what we're going to do is take this wet sponge and just cover the whole surface with that water that has a little bit of gum arabic in it. And what I'm going to do, instead of wringing it out in the bowl of water, this is what the empty bowl is here for. Any dirty water can be wrung out in your empty bowl. That way we'll keep this water nice and clean. And I'm just going to go over it one more time to remove any excess water. So now we know the plate is damp, but we don't want a lot of droplets of water just sitting on the surface. right, now let's apply some ink to our drawing. For your first print, similar to a lot of other printing methods, we're going to need a few passes of ink, a few more passes of ink than you would normally do for the very first print. Now notice that I'm wetting this plate every time, and that's to prevent the ink from sticking to those areas of the plate that I don't have my image area on. And I do want to keep this plate damp as I work. I don't want it to dry out. Now you might see a few areas. I'm going to try to bring a few of these areas out, called scumming, where you'll see some of the ink get left behind where you don't want it to be. And what you can do is wipe it off with a sponge. You can see some of it right here along the inking plate. And just give it a little bit of a scrub to scrub it off. If you have a really pesky area that won't come off, a little bit of toothpaste on a Q-tip will also rub it away. Let me add just a few more layers of ink before I take it to the printing press. I also want to mention another way to pull ink off the areas where you don't want ink is to what's called snapping back. A quick snap back will kind of yank the ink right off with your brayer. And I also want to point out that sometimes it can be hard to tell if you have enough ink on the surface and in the inked up areas of your image. Sometimes what helps is to create your image using a different colored tool. Like if you were to use a red Sharpie or a red grease pencil, then you would really see when the black ink starts to really fill in. All right, I think we have a pretty good inked up surface. Let's go ahead and take this plate to the printing press and take a look at the first proof print. I'm going to be printing the Pronto Plate on an etching press, and what I have is a prepared piece of paper that's been dampened. It's a nice damp sheet of paper is more receptive to the ink when it's damp. And I also have prepared a T and bar registration system. We can see the T at the top and the bar at the bottom. And these two correspond with the T and the bar that I've already drawn on the back of the Pronto Plate. So it lines up the T at the top and the bar at the bottom to get it centered on the piece of paper. Now notice, remember, this is the back of the plate. The front where the ink is now facing the piece of paper. And I've just pulled this off of that inking table, so it's still a little bit wet on the back. I'm just gonna wipe off some of that excess moisture with a sponge. Now before I send it through the press, I'm gonna add a few sheets of newsprint. And this is going to help absorb some of that excess moisture that's coming off the plate and the paper, and to give it a little bit more pressure as it goes through the printing press. And I'll lay down the 3 blankets across the top. And then let's crank it through. Okay, so I've sent it through the press once, and then I've come back with it a second time. I'm going to remove the newsprint and pull the plate off gently to see the print underneath. And there you have it. a lithographic image printed from a Pronto Plate. Now, if you're interested in printing your Pronto Plate without a printing press, what you'll do is ink it up in the same way, and then I'll show you how to print using a wooden spoon. Okay, I think I have enough ink on the plate. What I'm going to do is remove some of the scumming that I see around the edges and around the image here. And then what I'm going to do is just clear off an area where I can print. Now, to make this print, you're going to want a dampened sheet of paper. I'm going to set it down on a clean surface, and I'm actually going to go ahead and remove my gloves too, so I can use my nice clean hands for this process. And then what I want to do is just take the plate, turn it upside down and set it in place on top of my printing paper. And again, the back of this is pretty wet, so I'm going to get that sponge. I'm wringing out some excess water out of it, and I'm just going to remove some of that excess water from the back of this plate. And then you'll want to take a sheet of wax paper and lay it on top of the image area, and then you can use a wooden spoon to just rub the ink, transferring it from the Pronto Plate onto the printing paper. Now, I think I've gotten the whole image transferred. I'm not totally sure, so I'm just going to peel back a corner and check to see how much is transferred. It looks pretty good. I'm seeing a little bit right here that maybe needs a little bit more pressure. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull back the whole plate and take a look. It's not a bad transfer. I think I would maybe have gone back and rubbed over this area just a little bit more, but you can still get a pretty good result hand printing from your Pronto Plate. Cleaning up after using oil-based ink is a little bit different than cleaning up after using water-based ink. So first of all, what you'll want to do is take the sponge and the 2 bowls of water. These can just be flushed down the sink, and please just wash out the bowls with a little dish detergent and wring out the sponge a little bit as well to make it nice and clean again. For the ink, what I like to do is first remove a lot of the excess ink off of the inking plate. And I first do it with this palette knife, and I'm just going to scrape off as much as I can and smear it onto a page of this phone book, or any sort of excess scrap paper you have laying around works as well too. And what you can do is just fold this paper in half, tear it off the book, and throw this away in the trash. Remember, this cannot go into recycling. It needs to go in the trash. Now I still have a little bit of ink left here, some on my palette knife, and I still have some on my brayer. What I want to do is take a razor scraper and scrape off the last bit of that ink. This is just going to really help a lot with cleaning off any excess ink if you don't have all this messy ink laying around. And then I like to just scrape it off the palette knife as well. And then what I'll do is take the roller and just roll off any excess ink onto scrap paper. All right, what's left behind that's inky can be cleaned up by spraying a little bit of soy sauce or even just some vegetable oil. Just squirt a little bit onto the surface here. And I like to just take the brayer and run it through the vegetable oil to get it all covered. And what the oil is doing is basically breaking down the oils in the ink itself. So then you're going to take a wiping rag and just wipe the ink away. Don't forget to wipe the ink away on all sides of the palette knife. Don't forget your razor scraper. And now this part takes a little bit longer, so I'm going to spend some time getting all the oil off of the oil and the ink off the brayer. Now I have a little bit of a black stain on my brayer here, so it looks like there's ink on it, but I can tell because I'm wiping and I don't see any more ink coming off under the rag that my brayer is now clean. Now I'm going to set the brayer aside, but the inking plate, the palette knife, and the razor scraper are now covered with a layer of grease from the oil. So then what I want to do is use some sort of a degreaser. What I have is a simple green, and this is what we have in our studio, but you can use really any sort of a cleaning agent that works as a degreaser that you might get from your kitchen or bathroom cleaning supplies. Give it a little spray. Wipe it down with a paper towel. And now you're clean and ready for the next print.